What's going on, everybody? Good late afternoon. Hope you guys are doing well, continuing to do well as we creep towards the weekend here. And we've got one more nose tackle free agency video to do. There aren't a lot of nose tackles out there, so we did 4 in the first video, 4 in the second. There's going to be 4 in this, and that'll be that. At that point, I don't really think there's much else to find. At that point, you're looking through guys who have retired in the last couple of years. And honestly, there's a couple of guys we're going to talk about in this video who may very well retire in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, nose tackles, we did the high-end starters. And again, high-end is relative. We did the more moderate starters earlier. And now this video is going to be about depth guys. These are guys you sign if you want a backup, if you want somebody to play maybe 10 to 12 snaps a game, and you just need an insurance policy. And I don't know how the Seahawks are going to approach the nose tackle spot. Obviously, I think they need a starter right now, but they do have Cam Young. Maybe they look at him as being the backup nose tackle. Maybe they feel like Byron Murphy's good enough to play nose tackle for a few snaps a game, so they don't need another backup. But I don't know if Cam Young's going to be on the team this season. He might just get cut at this point because we haven't seen him in a while, and he might not be Mike McDonald's guy. Remember, he was drafted by under the Carroll regime. McDonald might want a different kind of player, so it's possible. It depends. So the way I see it, there are 4 viable options for a backup nose tackle other than Jonathan Hankins. We already talked about Hankins in a previous video. I'm not talking about him in this one. So we have John Jenkins. This is a guy that I've always liked, but he's about to turn 36 now, so I like him a lot less. Definitely a bigger guy. He's had a very nice career. Spent much of his career bouncing around from team to team to team. And he just, throughout the prime and the later portion of his career, like the twilight of his prime, he was consistently a really good and impactful presence on defensive lines wherever he landed. He spent a couple years in Miami, Chicago, New York. He was actually with the Seahawks for a couple games back in 2016. He started out with the Saints. It's been a nice little career for him. And I will say this, the last 2 years, he started all 17 games for the Raiders. So he has played as much as he can play, given the constraints of a 17-game season. And I do wonder if his lack of efficient play has something to do with him playing too much these last 2 years, but still, for whatever it's worth, Pro Football Focus, which has always been pretty complimentary of Jenkins's play, thinks that he was pretty bad this last year, 53.1. Over 600 snaps, that may be part of your problem there. And then the previous year, they thought he was about average as well, and it was about 600 snaps. So I'm a little bit conflicted here. Is he getting worse? Because again, I want to stress, you go back to previous years, like 2022, 2021, 2020, he graded out better than this. He was considered to be one of the better nose tackles in the league. But is this diminishing play because he's getting old? Or is it because he's playing too much on the Raiders because they start him in every single game? Like, you take a look at, previous places. He didn't start in Miami, but 2 games his whole stint there. He didn't start in Chicago. He really was not a full-time 17-game or 16-game starter until these last 2 years. So you take a look at his career snap counts on defense, you can see how little he was playing at previous places compared to how much he's played the last 2 years. So if you sign this guy as a backup and say, hey, you're only going to play 200 snaps this year instead of 600, maybe you get a better player, or maybe the fact that he's 36 supersedes all this. I don't know. Spotrac does have a market value page for him at 2.1 million. I mean, I think that if you assume that he's still capable of playing at a good level as long as you moderate his snaps, he's probably worth that if you need a backup. I think that you are asking for trouble if you ask this guy to start even at a low level of starting. You want this guy rotating in behind somebody else who takes most of the snaps. Next guy we're going to look at here is Leki Fotu, 4th round pick of the Cardinals many years ago, most recently a member of the Jets. He did not really play at all last year. He played in 2 games for the Jets and got hurt. And there's really not much to learn from whatever it is that he did as a member of the Jets. It was 3 tackles, 2 games, 1 start. Nothing you can really take away from any of that. So we're going to take a look at what he did as a Cardinal. And, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Pro Football Focus did not like him at all. His last year in Arizona, where he did play in 11 games and started 9 of them, so it's a decent sample size, 46.1. They thought he was bad. This is 300 snaps. This is not a bad sample size. Year before that, he was right at the bottom for defensive linemen, 32.4 overall grade. Now, 500 snaps, I'm sure having to play this much was a problem for him, but it's not that much, and he's young, right? This isn't a John Jenkins situation. So I don't know about Leki Fotu, right? Maybe if you say, hey, you're only going to play 200 snaps this year, it'll be okay. But at the same time, he's never really been a standout good player in his career. Market value, there's no market value page for him on Spotrac, by the way. So it's not even clear what he would command, if anything. This is probably a vet min guy. Maybe he pushes it up to 2 million because he is a little bit on the bigger side. And sometimes with these guys who are like 335 pounds, which is what Fotu weighs in at supposedly, you're paying by the pound almost. But it just depends on your perspective on what he might be able to do if you give him that limited role. Can you go play with your hair on fire if I only give you 200 snaps a season, if I give you 12 snaps a game? Hard to know. Next guy that I would consider signing for depth would be Linval Joseph, another old head, another bigger guy. Spent last year on the Cowboys, but he's been all over the place in his career. Going to turn 37 in October, so he's really getting up there in age, and he's probably near the end of the line here, if we're being perfectly honest. This was a former Pro Bowl player. This guy used to be a very good defensive tackle in this league, but those days are over. He hasn't started a game since 2022. When he did start 8 games for an Eagles team that went to the Super Bowl, I don't want to diminish the positive impact from that. I don't want to take anything away from that. But the last couple years, he did play every game for the Cowboys, right? He did. And then the year before that, he played about half the season for the Bills. But PFF, not that high. They thought he was moderately passable, 54.1. And his run defense in particular, they thought was really bad. Take that as you will. And he didn't play that much. He only played 264 snaps. So if you take it down to 200, you're not changing that much. And he's a year older. By the way, the year before for the Bills, they thought he was one of the worst players in the league, 38.8. That's only on 161 snaps through 7 games. So it wasn't like he got exhausted because he played the whole year and was playing 500 snaps. No. This guy just seems like he's got very little left in the tank. Maybe if you do, say, 10 to 12 snaps a game, you could get something good out of him. But again, what I'm going to say is with guys like this, you're not talking about giving them vet min even. If you want to get this guy off the couch, you're going to have to give him a little more than that, I think. Spotrac estimates 1 year, 2 million, which isn't a lot, but are you even going to get a veteran minimum amount of impact from him? Probably not. So, Linval Joseph, I mean, I love the guy. He's been around a while. I'd love to have him, but I would have loved to have had him a few years ago. Not really now. So, probably not. You have to really believe there's something there that hasn't been there in a while. And there's one more guy I want to cover in this video, and then we'll move on. Armon Watts. We're going back to a little bit younger here. This guy is going to turn 29 this offseason. 6th round pick of the Vikings several years ago. He's a smaller nose tackle, but he does have experience playing the position. He was a starter a couple years ago for the Bears, and since then he's been a reserve on the Steelers and the Giants. Only played 5 games last year, so we're not working with a big sample size in recent data. In the games that he did play last year, they thought he was okay, a little bit above the average, 58.8, workable, but it's only 87 snaps, so how much are we going to learn from that, right? Probably not much. The year before, they did grade him out quite well, and it was almost 300 snaps, so that's better. So encouraging. There's something to like here. There's something that should grab you a little bit. He is playing on a much better defense and surrounded by really good players with the Steelers a couple years ago than he would be with the Giants last year, but this is good. And then the year before that, not so much. They didn't like what he was doing, 49.2 on 531 snaps. So again, a big part of it is probably you got to moderate his snap count, keep it down to about 250 at most, and you're probably going to get pretty good things out of him. So I'd be okay with this. I don't think it's going to cost very much because he basically didn't play in 2024, but we do have evidence that he was good when he actually played most of the season in 2023. So could it push up to 2 million? I guess. Could it be Vetmin prove it because he didn't play last year? Really? Could be. I split the difference. I say he's going to get 1 year, 1.5 million. And if this is a Mike McDonald kind of player, I'd be okay with that. But there is no Spotrac market value page for this guy, so I'm basing it purely off of my assumptions. And when it comes to players like this, you can easily get those wrong. One team can drive up the bidding, and it's like, oh, wow, that guy got 2 years, 10 million out of nowhere. And this is a guy who's young enough and has had good years previously to where I guess I could see that. I would just say he is mostly a nose tackle, and nose tackles usually are not the guys who get bid up out of nowhere. All right, so that'll do it for this video. That'll do it for the look at nose tackle. Let me know what you think. See you guys later. Go Hawks. That is what I have for the nose tackles in free agency. Sound off. More stuff coming tomorrow. Go Hawks.